Starting Point Coaching and Consulting presents Kairos Conversations, Connecting with Quality, the podcast. Kairos is Greek for the right time, the right season, the right opportunity. This podcast features healthcare quality professionals who share their journeys, their advice, their struggles, how they made that transition into a new and exciting role. My heart's desire is that you find this podcast to be inspirational to you as you make your own journey. Don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues and friends and rate us on whichever podcast platform you listen to. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, I am joined by my next guest, Dr. Bryce Bowers. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Bowers.
Brandy, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
I am super excited for this conversation. I have been waiting for this conversation. So will you start by introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah, my name is Bryce Bowers. I do prefer to go by Bryce. I am a family medicine resident. I'm in my last year of residency. I'm three, but technically 4 months from graduating. So, wow, it's been a long road for me. I live in Michigan. I went to undergrad here. I went to medical school at Michigan State, and then I joined the Navy for a bit. And then I had a pretty bad experience of burnout in the Navy, and a really pretty low point in my mental health at that point, and ended up getting processed out and moved back home and finished. Now I'm finishing residency, and man, there's many miles and miles between here and there. So that's me. I don't just do medicine. I'm I advocate highly that we all need something outside of our careers. And so right now I'm very passionate about trading in the stock market. I'm big at, working out and taking care of myself. I meditate, I journal, I do all those things to kind of keep myself balanced. So and now I've entered into this whole physician wellness and mental health space, and I'm just having a ton of fun doing it. So, because I get to talk to people like you. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super excited to dive into all of that. But just going back a little bit, how did you get into medicine? Like, what made you decide to go in that path?
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up, pretty humble. I was a single mom, three kids kind of kid, right? It's me and my two sisters, and we were just really poor. And there's, obviously nothing wrong with being poor, but we struggled, and we moved, and we never had any sort of security or stability, and no one in my family was educated, and I just wanted a way out, like, just so bad, because I just wanted some sort of stability in my life. And so I luckily, my aunt married my now uncle, who basically changed the game for me and showed me that my way out would be college. My uncle's still he's my mentor, the guy I look up to most today. And I found, he pushed me to just get an education. And so I did that. No one in my family ever went to college. So I just kind of on a whim did. I thought I was a pretty smart kid. And I got to college and I loved it. I just loved learning so much. I was having such a great time. I was actually a psych major, and I wanted to be a psychologist because people told me that I was a good listener and that I gave good advice. So I'm like, all right, cool. Let's go down that road. But, I waited till about my junior year, but I always had this idea that I wanted to be a physician. And my physician, my primary care provider at the time, kept trying to push me in that direction. I kept saying no. But, I just always, once I kind of realized that in undergrad that I was doing really well, and I thought I had a lot of potential. I really started to believe in myself. And so I kind of threw my hat into the ring my junior year, and I hadn't taken any of those prereq classes that you need. So, I had to stay an extra year in undergrad, which honestly is never a bad thing. I would go back to I think we all would, right? When our lives were just a little bit simpler. So I took the prereq classes for classes I honestly never took. I did very well, and I did the bare minimum, and I applied to med school, took my MCAT, and boom, I always wanted to go to Michigan State, and there I was. And with some of the most brilliant minds, that I've ever met. I was extremely humbled when I showed up there. But, so my path into medicine, it was not like my parents are doctors, and I wanted to be a doctor since I was 5 years old. It was quite the opposite. I never thought that I would have the potential or even the possibility to do this, and that's just testament to people in your lives and people that see, the potential that you have and people that believe in you and what they can do, because I am here because of everybody else. I mean, I, obviously did some work, but mostly it's people who believed in me and supported me. And there are so many people between here and there. So, and now look, I just passed my last set of boards and I'm 3 months from graduating. So it's a dream come true. It really is.
Congratulations. And as an Ohio State fan, I won't hold Michigan.
Okay. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Yeah, there for a while we were kind of getting into it in football and whatnot. But yeah, you're right. We just agree we don't like Michigan very much. So we're good.
So you finished or you started medical school and then you switched and went to the military, or
what
was that process like?
It's a big part of my story. So when I was in medical school, like most of us, were naive and scared because medical school is quite expensive if you didn't know that. And I was just staring down the barrel of some undergrad debt and then some med school debt on top of that. And, you're looking at close to $500,000, right?
Oh my gosh, just to say that number, right?
Yeah, I know, right? It sends chills down your spine. So one of my friends had, he told me about, the Navy, and that they would, if you signed up for their program, they pay for your tuition, they give you a monthly stipend, they pay for your books, they pay for everything, and so, they're walking around campus all the time and just checking in with you and trying to see, and, it's what happens. I mean, it's a good time to make a sale when you've got someone that's really fearful of the future, right? And so I joined. He was one of my good friends. I trusted him, and so they left me alone in medical school, basically, right? I was just doing my 1 through 4 years, and I was making pretty decent money, and it was great. Everything felt awesome. I was like, wow, everybody's losing money. I'm making money, and all my stuff's paid for. My tuition's taken care of, but. But once I graduated med school, I had to, my time was up of, leisure. So I had to go, start my residency in the Navy. I chose family medicine, and, they don't let you basically, go outside of their realm. You're theirs now, and you signed a contract. And so I shipped off to basically San Diego, California, which I picked the Navy because they basically have, I always say this, bases in warm places. And, so it was beautiful. I loved it. I love the city. You'd find somebody hard pressed to say, well, I don't really like San Diego very much. But the problem was that, I had not been honest, and I had really been struggling. I was really struggling with anxiety and depression, even substance use at that time. And I let no one be the wiser about that. And I showed up to California with all those problems, 2,000 miles from home, and the COVID pandemic looming in the future. And I was a new intern, right? And so it was just a perfect storm. And so, I did my intern year, and it was hard. I mean, it was extremely hard. And then once COVID hit, the military wouldn't let us travel. I couldn't go home. We were working all the time, locked into our base, and it was a bad, bad situation for me. And so I'm very grateful for that part of my journey, and we can get into that more. But yeah, and so, I had a very, very bad bout of mental health struggles, and ended up getting processed out of the Navy and moving back home to Michigan. So, and we could talk more about that. It's a big part of my story if you'd like.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you'd be willing to share what led to the anxiety and depression and mental health challenges that you brought with you to California.
Yeah. So, medical school is like in nursing school, PT school, all these schools are extremely demanding, right? And you're studying a lot, and the stakes are so high, and you're in the background. You're like, oh my God, I've got all this debt. I've got to succeed. And then you just start to develop this conditioning in medical school that, like, I have to be the best. I cannot fail. Like, I've got to prove myself. I've got to be the best. And over time, that wears on you. I remember after I took my first step exam, which is the big one in medical school. Not so much anymore, but I took the last set where it really mattered, because that step score basically determined what specialty you could go into. Right? If you didn't score high, good, you can say bye to dermatology and orthopedic surgery and all that stuff. So, there was a lot riding on this exam. So, obviously before, and that was at the end of my second year. Before that, I mean, it's just constant exams, it's constant pressure, it's studying all day long, and that just starts to wear on you. But I remember after I took that first step exam, and I'd been studying. I studied for 2 months straight, 6, 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, and I didn't exercise, I didn't see anybody, and I mean, I just remember walking out of that exam, and I just had this feeling of like, oh my God, I'm so done with this. Like I'm exhausted mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, every Lee you could think of. I was just done, and that was the first time I was burnt out. I know now I was burnt out. I didn't know it back then. Right. But
Right.
the problem was that you got to keep going. I got third and fourth year ahead of me, and maybe a little break, but then it just keeps going. And so as you're getting closer and closer, the work keeps getting harder. The demands keep getting higher until you become a resident. And then it's like, the training wheels come off and it's go time. And so I never was honest with I was struggling a lot in medical school. And to cope, I started using substances. I started drinking a ton, just to alleviate those symptoms. God, I needed something. But in retrospect, obviously, I wish I would have said something to somebody and got some help, but I just didn't. I didn't want to seem like a failure, and I didn't. I was like, I'm a doctor. I should be able to figure this out. And so, I took a lot of baggage with me to Southern California, and every time my friends and family would call, I'd say, I'm great, I'm perfect, I'm fine, and then I'd hang up the phone and start crying because I felt bad. I was lying to them, and I knew that I was struggling. And my substance use got really bad, and I started missing work and things like that. And I just knew I managed to somehow finish my intern year, and thank God I did. But after that, like I hit a rock bottom, right? Because I was drinking so much, which makes your anxiety and depression so much worse. And I finally hit this low point that just said, like, I can't do this anymore. I need help. And so basically, when I hit that point, I came forward and I said honestly about everything. And it was determined at that time that the best thing would be to process me out of the Navy because my mental health was just not in a good place. And so there was a lot of, I felt like a huge failure. I mean, I felt like, my world was ending. Because of some actions I did, I got kicked out of my residency program. I got kicked out of the Navy, and my dream of being a doctor was over, and so I moved home to Michigan, and I just felt like a total failure. To tell my friends and family that, hey, I really screwed up. I made a bad choice with my alcohol use, and I'm really struggling, and I got in trouble, and so it was the hardest thing in the world, and I had so much guilt and shame, and I didn't know what to do with myself, and so that was a big time in my life. And obviously, based off what I've just said, I'm much better now. I'm about to graduate residency. So I think there's something to be said about second chances, and we can certainly talk about that too. But, I share all that because I just want everyone to know, like, I've hit rock bottom, and everyone has the potential to do that too. And I just don't want anybody to go through what I went through because it's been a long road. And, I don't recommend it. I mean, I've grown a lot, but I could have avoided a lot of this if I would have just asked for some help early on,
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about how you came out of that. But first, I want you to give advice to someone who may be where you were before, who hasn't yet sought help or hasn't yet talked to anyone yet.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing to do, and I think that's the question I get asked most on podcasts because it's probably the most important question and a thing that would have avoided a lot of heartache and heartbreak in my journey. I want everyone to know that it's okay to not be okay. I want everyone to know that, our healthcare, especially, like, our job is extremely hard. Even in the schooling years of nursing school, PT school, all those, it's extremely demanding. You know what I mean? And it's not a matter of like you're not resilient or you're a failure or anything like that. You're just, believe it or not, you're still a human being and you still have feelings, and it's completely okay that you're struggling, right? The only thing is we don't want you to be struggling forever. And so I think there's a lot of pride with us, especially, that we pride ourselves on just grinding and keeping our nose to the grindstone and pushing on and pushing beyond our limits. But there has to come a point where you have to really get honest with yourself and say, look, I don't think I can do this by myself, and I'm not doing okay, and I really need to reach out for some help. And I guarantee you that, if you're in a room with 100 people, at least 73 of them are having some or similar thoughts that you are, or struggling with very similar things. You'd be surprised, right? And so there's my mission in what I do now is to normalize those conversations, right? And in medicine and healthcare in general are getting better about it. We're not quite there, but speaking up and saying how you're feeling is the most important thing you do. If I would have done that, I mean, I've had a great journey, obviously, and I'm so thankful from where I'm at now, but holy moly, I could have saved thousands of dollars in lawyer fees. And I mean, just a lot of nights of lost sleep, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of everything, if I had just spoken up and just, a friend, a family member, your therapist, a colleague that you trust, come forward, please, and just let us help you. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I would venture to say that some people who are in fields like ours, Bryce, hesitate to speak up because of fear from a healthcare perspective and from a licensure perspective. If you're not okay, or if you say you're not okay, what will that do for my license? What will that do for my malpractice insurance? What will that do for all these things? Because as healthcare professionals, unfortunately, we're expected to have it together all the time. And so what would you say to that person, to the person that is like, well, if I speak up, I might lose my license?
Yeah, I love that question. And this is something that I honestly had no idea about before, like everything happened with me. So I appreciate that question so much. And, I'm part of a few organizations, and even to some degree at my residency, and what we're doing advocating for is changing the language on licensure, because at the end of the day, right, it just doesn't make any sense. This is completely backwards that, we are expected to shoulder all of this weight, and yet we can't struggle. That just doesn't make any sense, right? And, and so the way the language is like, it just makes us not want to come forward and say, hey, I'm not okay. Hey, I'm struggling. But don't you want the people that are in charge of your health to be healthy? I mean, don't you want them? I mean, they're making critical life decisions.
100%.
And so they should be able to come forward because they're humans and say, hey, listen, like, just because I'm a doctor or a physical therapist or a nurse doesn't mean that I'm immune from feeling anxiety or depression or struggling with substance abuse, right? And so there have been movements in many states to change that language, and that's changing, right? But I agree with you. It's just still not there yet. But here's the alternative, right? If you don't, I completely understand. I 1,000% understand that, not wanting to come forward because of fear of licensure ramifications and everything. And to some degree, I thought the same thing. And just use my story as an example. At some point, you will reach a critical point. At some point, if you do not get help, the consequences of you waiting will be far more severe than if you kind of come forward in the initial stages of things, right? And the other side of it is that, in a way, if you're going to be providing healthcare to people, in a way, it is your duty to make sure that you are your best self to provide for those people, right? And so if you are not pouring from a full cup, you are not giving your best self to patients. And that's not what patients deserve either, because we're all in it for the patient, right? And so, but again, I think the bigger point is that you eventually, if you're struggling with substance use, if your anxiety and depression are getting so bad, you can try and hide it, and you'll probably be successful for a little bit. But eventually, it's going to reach this critical point where you're going to have a very serious event like I did, and then you're going to have twice as much trouble on your hands, right? And you just don't want that, because it's so much harder to come back from that. Now, I'm living proof. I had an alcohol-related incident. I reported that to the board. I reported it to the Navy. I reported it to everybody, my residency. But I got back, right? I came home. When I re-interviewed for residency, I got like 20 interviews. I'm not bragging. I'm letting people know that it's possible, right? There are people that believe in second chances, and there are people that understand that you're a human, but you really don't have it. I just don't think there's a choice. You have to get yourself better. I mean, even in my world, physicians, you know how many physicians die each year by suicide? It's like 300 to 400. Let's
Oh,
call it,
wow.
let's go in the middle, call it 365. How many days are in a year? 365. That's one physician a day. And there's data out there for this. So, that's the alternative, in my opinion. I don't mean to sound extreme, but, that's what happens when we hide what we're dealing with. And we want you on this earth. We need you here. Yes, to do what you're put on this earth to do, but more for you as a human being. We just need you here. So I just encourage you to speak up and come forward and get help as best you can.
And so once you came back to Michigan and got help, how did you make that journey back into medicine, back into your residency?
Yeah, that's another big part of it is, so I basically, I had the big question because when I was an intern, I learned what medicine can really be like. And I was very, very scared of it. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, about like the insurance companies and how much control they have and et cetera. And so I really had to like sit and reflect and make that question. Now, at the time, I was feeling so much shame and guilt that I used that as a way to motivate myself. I'd say, Bryce, you've got to figure this out. You cannot let your friends and family think you're a failure. You have to figure this out. You have to get back into residency. And so, I did. And I realize now that was not the best way to motivate myself. But what I did is I just started, making steps to make sure that I could get back into residency somehow. And so I actually, and this on the physician side, if you're a physician and you've done 1 year of residency, you can get a license to practice in most states. And so,
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you can be a general practitioner. So I applied for my Michigan license to practice, and I got approved. I did, but granted, that was contingent on me being in a substance use monitoring program, but I still got approved. So again, I want to emphasize that there are second chances, right? And so I got approved, and I practiced in a small town in Sturgis, Michigan. It's like a rural town. And it was extremely scary, but, I did it. And about that time was the residency application cycle. And I got pretty lucky because I started interviewing. And like I said, I got a good amount of interviews. And let me say this, we're all going to make mistakes in life. And it's important to just own up to it. I was as honest as the day is long. I said every little ounce of thing that was the truth. Because I had nothing. I mean, what did I have to lose at that point? Everybody was going to find it out anyway. So, and everybody, pretty much every interview I did, everybody resonated really strongly with what I said. And they could tell I was being genuine and authentic. And I was just asking for a second chance. I said, please, I promise, I've got the help I need. I'm getting monitored. I'm doing everything I need. I just need a second chance. And I found a program here in Detroit, Michigan that needed a second year. And so I transitioned into this program as a second year. I thought I was going to have to restart residency completely. And I love this program. I mean, it's the best program. I'm so blessed. I mean, I can't thank them enough for taking a chance on me, but then also how they've treated me and supported me since I've been here. I mean, good God, it's just been amazing. So
they didn't treat you badly and have look at you with a side eye because of the things that you share with them.
Right. No, they didn't. No, not at all. I mean, it was, I think my residency is a bit of a rare place because, I mean, I had a group interview of 10 people and I had to tell my story to 10 people on a Zoom meeting, and that was hard, but every single one of them, I could just tell, I just felt the support and love. And since I've been here, I mean, I've almost been here 2 years now, and they have done nothing but just care for me and support me and make sure I'm okay. And so am I lucky? Maybe, I don't know. But I think I just, I made the right steps. I fessed up. I said, I screwed up and I'd like a second chance. And I've got it. And I'm almost done with the monitoring program. I'm almost out of residency. So I'm telling you, I'm living proof that everything's going to be fine. It will be fine. It will. There certainly is some pain between here and there. And I've had a lot of that, but I'm living proof that everything's going to be fine. It really will.
Well, how do you manage your mental health challenges or needs with the demands of residency? Because from what I've heard about residency, I'm not a physician, but what I've heard about residency is It's all day, every day. You're working these crazy hours under your attending physician, and it's like a nonstop kind of workload. So how do you manage or keep yourself from going back to that dark place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've wrote a few pieces in my blog about that. I think I even did a podcast episode on it too. But, I think first and foremost, I think you have to have the foundation. For those of you that are interviewing for residency or any program, right? PT program, doesn't matter. In nursing school, like, you have to get a sense of like what the program's like. Is it toxic or are they supportive? Like, because life's going to happen to you no matter where you are, no matter who you are. Life will happen to you at some point. And so
100%.
And stuff that you just will not be able to predict. And so you have to be, go into a place where you feel supported and that they're going to help you through that, right? That's I think fundamentally a thing. It's like, oh, I got to go to this program. I've got to get into this school and stuff. And it's like, I caution you on that because I think you need to find a place that will support you through those very hard times, But, once I got here and I finally kind of figured things out a little bit more, the first thing I did was like, and it took some coaching on my end. I got a physician coach, but I got really good and still am really good about setting boundaries, right? And I think that's like one thing we all struggle with. I mean, in life, but also as healthcare workers, because we just keep saying yes to everything, and it's like, hey, do you want to be on the sepsis committee? No, I don't. Thank you very much for the offer. Do you want to be on the ethics committee? Nope, I don't. Thank you. My free time is my free time. And I tend to utilize that to the best of my ability. And I don't just jump on committees and stuff, to do that. And, do I call patients on weekends? I don't. No, absolutely not. That's not because I don't care about my patients. I love them. I care so much about them. But for me to be my best, I understand that I need to take some time off and get back. But then also, I mentioned this earlier, what I think is so important is you have to find something outside of your job. You cannot let your job be your identity, right? And that's not to say you can't love your job and love what you do, but so many of us, I'm a PT, I'm a nurse. It's like, that's fine. But you're also Sarah, you're also Jim, who are you outside of here? Like, what do you do? And that's why I blog and podcast. I love this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. It keeps me balanced outside of work. It gives me an outlet, and so many of us, when we go through school and we're studying so long, and especially in residency, you're working so much, we just think that when we actually do have some time off, we don't know what to do with ourselves. But you've got to find that hobby, that creative outlet that you probably either used to have or that's burning inside you and needs to be let out. You know what I mean? And so that's been pivotal for me. That's been absolutely pivotal. And, again, like I make it a habit. I exercise. I move my body. I like that term better. 5 days a week. I don't drink anymore, obviously. I think, using substances is like the number one detrimental thing when you're working this much. I eat well. I sleep. I do. And there's some months, I got to work 24-hour shifts and stuff. But, but when I can, I sleep. I make sure I'm getting good sleep. I'm making sure I'm staying off social media. I'm making sure I'm drinking plenty of water. This fundamental, simple stuff that adds up. I journal, I meditate, I stretch, I do all those things. And my residency is very supportive of all those things. I say, here are my needs. And they say, yeah, we got you, So there's a lot of things that I do now that I never used to do. That's really changed the game for me.
Yeah, two things you said just really stood out to me. And I really resonate with what you said about finding a school that really supports you because, and I don't even think I've shared this publicly before, but when I was in PT school, I lost my sister. My sister passed away when she was like 21 years old in a car accident. And I was in PT school in my second year of PT school. And the fact that I even made it through that program is a whole other subject. But the reason I bring it up is because when I got ready to fly from Ohio back to North Carolina where my family lived, I had my classmates, and you're talking about broke college students who don't have any money, who pulled together to pay for my plane ticket home.
Oh my gosh.
And it just brings tears to my eyes even thinking about it all these years later. That was back in 2003.
Wow.
But what they did for me and the support that that program gave me while I was not there grieving the loss of my sister, I could not ask for a better program to support me coming back, really help me to catch up on what I missed and all of that stuff. So I really agree with you about when you're looking at schools, it's not just about the name of the school. It's about, are they going to support me when life does happen? Because life will happen.
Yes, it will. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what we just don't, you can't predict that stuff. And I'm so sorry for what happened to you and that loss. I mean, that's tragic, but I hate to say this, but I've heard, a very similar stuff, like, somebody in my family passed away, or, somebody's in the ICU, and these programs, especially the surgical specialties in medicine that are like, okay. And it's like, they have absolutely no compassion or empathy. And they'd say, this is your life. This is your job now. And you just don't want to be a part of that. I guarantee it. I mean, you may be a great surgeon, or you may be great whatever, but, being a part of a program like that does not make you a great human. It will not mold you into who you really want to be, I think.
Yeah, I mean, none of your patients ask you which school you went to and what grades you make, right? They want to know, can you do your job?
Yeah.
Which brings me to the second point that really stood out to me about what you said. But our identities sometimes get wrapped up in our jobs and our professional identity, because I think that's kind of instilled in us. We work so hard and we pay all this money, and we kind of get initiated through this program, whether it's PT school or nursing school or medical school, and we come out and now we're that person instead of being the human that we are.
Yeah. And it's like you said, I think like the runway to get to where we are is so long, right? Yeah. I mean, undergrad and then grad school. I mean, I've been at this, I started when I was 21 and I'm 34 now. So 13 years, and I'm just about done, so that's like, and you're right. I mean, you're ingrained in it. You're living it. You're eating, breathing, sleeping it 24/7, 365 to get to this point. And so how does it not become part of your identity? But, the older I get, the more I realize that like, there are important things in life and there are very not important things in life. And my title certainly isn't one of them. And because that can be, I mean, I'll always, I got the degree, whatever, I'll always be a doctor, but this job, like anything could happen, right? Like I could be, removed for whatever at any given point. Something could happen to me, heaven forbid, that does not let me do this job anymore. Right. And then if you lose your job for whatever reason, whatever it may be, maybe it's something you did, maybe it's something you had absolutely no control over. Now you're outcasted from doing whatever job. Now you're struggling with this identity crisis. Like, I mean, I've known doctors that have gotten multiple sclerosis and they can no longer practice, right? So, and then they struggle with this crisis of like, well, who am I? I can't practice medicine anymore. So who am I? And, and that's why I think it's so important to, it takes a lot of work, and I struggle with this too, and I'm still to some degree, like when people ask me what I do, oh, I'm a doctor, and honestly, it feels good when I say that, but I also realize that like, there's so much more to me outside of medicine. Like, yeah, like I'm a friend, I'm a dog dad. I'm a trader. I'm a blogger. I'm a podcaster. I do all these other things. I'm a great son. And that stuff brings me so much more joy, I think. And not saying that that medicine doesn't, because what I get to do is an absolute privilege. But I don't identify myself as like my job anymore, because, man, we're all such great humans. We have so many cool, unique skills unlike anybody else in the world. You are literally, no one else is like you. You know what I mean? And so working on, that's where the meditation comes in, and the journaling and things like that, to discover who are you outside of your job. Because if you lose your job, you're going to have this identity crisis, and it's not fun. It's really not fun.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. It's very easy to get wrapped up in who we are as a professional, but we're so much more outside of that. What do you think would help our healthcare system, the patients that we serve and the colleagues that we work with? What would help healthcare be safer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this is something I've been working on myself. I think at the end of the day, right, like the system is the system, and all of us don't like it, right? I don't think there's anyone that walks around, and says, man, I really love the U.S. healthcare system. It's so efficient and it allows me to do what I want to do. I mean, literally not a single person has ever said that, right? Nor will they ever, likely. And so I think it's really important to do two things. I think one, I think it's important to bring awareness to these issues, and not in a way of you're just like ranting and complaining, but like, for advocacy for change, right? There's a way to do it, and it's maybe slow moving and it's tough and it takes us to unite together, but like, you do have to, it's okay to speak out about these things. Like, I've got patients that I know need MRIs, and I'm, having to call the insurance company 3 times a week on my free time just to get them an MRI, and so I hate that. I hate that more than anything. So I'll speak out about that stuff just so people can bring awareness, because there's power in numbers. But at some degree, you do have to accept that if you do want to work in the system, it is the system. Change can come if we work together, but it will be the system like it is for a while. And so what I've started to do that's helped me tremendously is remember that like this is all about the patient, right? And this is all about them. And sometimes taking ourselves out of the equation is really helpful. And our jobs are so hard and the system sucks so much that oftentimes, it's like, well, physical therapy didn't do this, or they didn't come see the patient. And, oh, well, the nurse didn't give the meds on time. And then the nurse says, no, well, the doctor never put in the order. It's like, I think it's important for us to remember that we can't fight each other. We have to unite, right? Like
Exactly.
we cannot, and that's what the insurance companies and the system wants. It wants us to self-destruct and fight each other. But in reality, our common goal is the patient. And so what I've started to do that's helped me with a lot of the annoying stuff about our healthcare system is before I walk into a room, whether it's in the hospital or a clinic, I say, how can I find compassion for this patient? How can I look at this patient and just find compassion for them? How can I get to know them? What is their job? What do they do? Do they have a sister? Do they have a brother? What's important to them? And it's hard because I'm seeing patients back to back every 20 minutes in clinic, but just that like brief thing reminds me that I'm in this for the patient. And, and to them, it can make basically a 5-minute visit feel like a 20-minute visit versus a 20-minute visit feeling like a 5-minute visit. Right. And so I think if we do that, I think if we kind of remember that, these people are suffering in front of us and all of our jobs are aimed at helping them. Right. That will unite us a little bit more and bring us back to center. So I won't like get mad that the nurse, gave the insulin late or something like that. It's because, they've got their own obstacles too. I wouldn't want to be a nurse. I give all the credit to them. I wouldn't want to be a physical therapist, and people say I wouldn't want to be a doctor. I'm like, well, here we go. We're all just saying it in circles. But, I think it's just important to remember that we do this for the patients. That's the most important things. And they're very vulnerable, and we have absolute privilege to be at the position we're in to help them.
100%. Hi, friends. I have found that when clinicians decide that it's time to leave the bedside, often it's like throwing darts at a board. They just want out and will take almost anything just to move into a non-clinical role. I have always recommended taking the time to really identify your strengths, passions, and skills, and what will fuel you so that your next role is your best role. I couldn't find a tool specifically for healthcare professionals that would provide the depth needed to get a really good career evaluation. Until now, I am so happy to recommend the Stream Ahead assessment created by Career Clinic. It's the profile that I wish I had created first. Stream Ahead is thorough, comprehensive, and frankly spot on. And yes, I have personally taken it myself. I'll share the link in the show notes section of this podcast. You can thank me later. Well, I want to circle to, the work that you do outside of medicine as a podcast host and blogger. Let's talk about your podcast, Badge of Burnout.
Yeah, I mean, this has been my move for the past. I started in September. The name. I'll just briefly give a story about the name, but the name is just, us in healthcare, we're really good at like bragging about our burnout, right? Like, oh, well, I studied for 10 hours last night. Well, I studied for 12 hours last night. Well, I didn't sleep. I stayed up all night and pulled an all-nighter. And it's like. And in medicine, especially, it's like, well, I admitted 8 patients. Well, I admitted 10, and I handled 2 OBs, and I stayed up for 24 hours straight. And we're all just like bragging, like about how poorly we're taking care of ourselves, and who's suffering the most. And I'm just a little over that phenomena. It's got to change the narrative because it's not good for us, right? Like, it's not good for us to not sleep for 24 hours. It's not good for us to manage that many patients, to get called that many times. It's just not good for us. So there's just this culture in healthcare for all of our specialties that whoever has worked the hardest, quote unquote, worked the hardest is the best. And it's just not the case. In my mind, the person that deserves the most recognition is the person that can do their job, but also take care of themselves. And so that's why I coined the name Badge of Burnout, is because I'm ready to shed that badge and stop wearing my burnout as a point of pride, because it's not. Right? Like, I've done that, and guess where it got me? Rock bottom, and I'm not going back there. So, and that's why I just started writing about it. And when I started writing it, it was so cathartic, and I've just been sharing my story mostly and tips I've learned along the way. It has helped my burnout so much. I mean, I think in healthcare, we all kind of hover on that line of burnout regardless of what we do, because it's just hard, but it's helped me so much to have something outside of medicine that just really brings me alive. I mean, I could talk about it for hours. I honestly could. I love coming on podcasts like this to talk about it because it's just so fun. And then, I got some great feedback on it. I had complete strangers reach out to me and say, wow, this is great. Like, I needed this today. And even my program director, I didn't know she was following my blog, but at one point, she's like, Bryce, I'm so proud of you. And, I needed to read this today. And I'm like, okay, well, this is really cool. I mean, this is excellent. That was like a fire and joy I've never felt before, and so, and then I just, well, the next step is a podcast. So let's do this, because there are so many great people with stories out there, and I want them on my podcast to share their story, share their insights, and I want to do it in a different medium too. So, if I've had a rough day at clinic, which most days in clinic can be pretty rough, but I can come home and I know that I've got this other outlet to kind of to bring me some pause, and it's way better than numbing myself like I used to with alcohol or Netflix or bad food or something like that. So.
That's awesome. So it's called Badge of Burnout. So it's a blog. And how often do you publish a blog post? If people tune into your blog, what can they expect?
So I try and my frequency right now that I'm trying to get is I post I post once a week. So like first week of the month, it would be a written post, and then a podcast, then a written post and a podcast, so on and so forth. And it depends on like what month of residency I'm on. Like, I've got inpatient coming up, so that's going to decrease. And I'll say this, like, even if it's a good thing, you can always turn it into a bad thing by trying to overdo it. So be mindful of that. But, but what can you expect is it's just a very raw, authentic, genuine display of my story, my struggles, my journey through medicine and the ups and downs I've had and the lessons I've learned. And I don't do it because I want a pat on the back. I do it because I don't want anybody to make the same mistakes I did, because I made some bad ones. And you can expect, like, I mostly deal in the physician world, but the principles apply to everybody in healthcare, because we're all facing the same monster, right? And so I have physicians on, but I also have non-physicians on too, and you can hear their stories, you can hear their struggles, because that's a big part of. I want to normalize that it's okay that your colleagues, the doctor, if you're a physical therapist, the doctor down the hall is probably struggling with something. Even though we get put on this pedestal, we are humans and we really struggle with stuff. So I just want to normalize that. I bring people on to, normalize that conversation and say, hey, look, like, we're all humans, we're all cool, we've all got stories, and here's what you can learn. So I think it's just really important to do that.
I really appreciate your authenticity and being able to really share the struggles that you went through, because sometimes you only hear the highlights, the good stuff, how great it went. I finished my degree and I'm whatever profession I decided to do. And, we minimize the struggle. And so I'm glad that you're bringing life back to that, so people can know that they're not alone and that it's okay. Like you said, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to reach out and to speak out about it.
Right. Yeah. And even like in Brandy, in your case, it's like, and obviously I don't know you that well, but what you shared with me about your sister, it's like, oh my gosh, like when you share stuff like that, I mean, do you notice what happens? It's like everybody's guard goes down a little bit. Like, oh my gosh, she's a human, and I know she's had a tragedy in her life, and she was vulnerable enough to share that. It's like, wow, like what a great human. Like I actually, I feel a little more comfortable sharing what I wanted to share now because she did. So I think there's a lot that can come from, being genuine and authentic like that. That's all, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to put the link to your website and your podcast in the show notes section so people can reach out to you and can really, I just hope people resonate with what you're saying, because I have learned a lot from you, even in our short conversation. And I just think more people need to hear that it's okay. It's okay to share what you've been through. It's okay to give yourself grace and self-care. It's okay to not be on all the time, even in service of others, right? That you can be who you are as a human and not just who you are as a professional.
Yep, that is the mission. That's the message. And yeah, and sometimes it takes a few times to understand that. Sometimes you really got to bounce off rock bottom to like recognize that and that sort of thing. And everybody's on their own journey, and I respect that. I don't force people to share stuff they don't want to share. When the time is right, if they feel like they want to, they will. But I just want to serve as like a beacon and a hope and reference to say, like, we've got to change this narrative of us in healthcare can't struggle. Us in healthcare aren't humans. Us in healthcare also don't have feelings, or something like that, because it is quite the opposite. Quite the opposite.
Any parting words for the audience?
I just want to reemphasize that the 2 points that, if you are struggling, you're a human, and that's okay. We need you on this earth. We need you. We need and want you to be happy, healthy, and whole. We all care about you. There's people that care about you on this planet. You are more than your job. You are more than your title. And so, if you're feeling any type of way that isn't right, please just reach out and seek some help, because we're here to help you. I can't promise that everybody will, but it's so important. Please avoid, some of the pitfalls I've made, because, your life can be, it's a beautiful thing. It can be such a beautiful ride if you're able to just get some help and let us help you. So I think that's it. I'd leave everybody with that.
Well, thank you so much, Bryce. I have really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Brandy. It flew by. I appreciate you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. It would mean a lot if you would share this episode with a friend or a colleague. I would be honored to encourage them in their journey too.